Hello everyone. When video games are mentioned, the majority think about kids. In the same way, people tend to look at violent video games as their main source of violence. They appear to believe the idea of a kid bringing Grand Theft Auto into reality. Since video games and the people who play them vary in many different ways, it's extremely difficult to reach a straightforward yes or no conclusion as to whether violent video games actually make people more violent. However, personally, I believe the answer is no. The solitary act of enjoying or playing video games won't lead to a more violent person. Many different things should be taken into account. For example, a child might have anger issues or medical conditions of the sort that increase aggression. They could be depressed or have mental instabilities. A kid who plays violent video games and lives in a rough neighborhood where aggression is more common will have a much higher chance of becoming violent than a kid who only plays violent video games. These huge factors put much more weight on the person's mind than video games themselves. If anything, video games would only give them a tiny push. This idea can be compared to seeing people use drugs on television. The media itself will likely not cause the viewer to begin abusing drugs. However, if the viewer already lives surrounded by family members or a community that does abuse drugs, then the media might have a small effect on them. Even with these two factors present, it is rare that violent video games will affect violence levels as much as to turn the person into a thief or worse. I found one line in an article saying, if someone said feel-good games made people philanthropist-like, most people would probably deem that idea a stretch, and I completely agree. Most people would look at you like you're crazy. The most they would do is probably leave the player feeling all fuzzy inside, but few would actually act. This is how I view the idea that violent video games make people more violent. People could have different ideas as to what is considered violent. Pushing or shoving could be violent acts for some, while violence to others could mean punching or acts that cause physical injuries. Some would even consider Pac-Man a violent video game. This is just an example of how different people hold varied definitions of violence. Similarly, they also react differently. This is like how emotional commercials might not affect everyone in the same way. Not everyone is susceptible to reacting emotionally to the media. The effects that video games do produce are partially invited by the consumer themselves. People choose their media at their own will. If they think they're not ready for it, they can choose to not purchase the game. I would say video games are also an outlet to relieve stress or anger rather than cause it. In conclusion, I believe violent video games are okay to play as long as you can handle it. It will not cause you to become a more violent person.